Margaret, a 63-year-old widow from Chicago, had recently learned that her illness, not fatal but exhausting, had returned. Instead of sitting at home drowning in gloom, she decided to give herself a gift, a 10-day cruise on the Celebrity Silhouette, sailing from Fort Lauderdale, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Curaçao, Aruba, and back. Along the way, she'd encounter surprises and a reminder, as long as you're breathing, you're alive. The Celebrity Silhouette slowly pulled away from the dock, like a beautiful giant house that had suddenly decided to go on a journey and take all its residents along. Margaret stood on the top deck, holding the delicate stem of her champagne glass. A gentle breeze played with her hair, softly, almost as if trying to calm her restless thoughts. "Well, goodbye, Chicago. Hello, adventure," she murmured, smirking to herself. Her voice carried that familiar irony she always used to mask her fears. Let's just hope this adventure ends well, and not like that book where the heroine gets eaten by sharks in Chapter 1. The deck buzzed with energy. People waved at loved ones on shore, took photos, laughed, and some even cried. Margaret realized there was no one for her to wave to, and that brought a twinge of sadness. She took a quick sip of champagne and sighed. "Well then, dear, you've got 10 days to not think about pills or doctors. Just sun, sea, and..." She hesitated, glancing at the rowdy group of retirees by the pool. Well, a sea of other retirees. Margaret looked around cautiously. Everything seemed so new, so bright, almost offensively alive, and the contrast made her chest tighten. She was used to seeing the world through the lens of illness and quiet sorrow. But here, life was bubbling all around her, trying to prove otherwise. She adjusted her favorite light scarf, blue with tiny polka dots, a gift from her son. Michael always said a scarf could hide age, illness, and pretty much any other life mess. Oh, Michael! As if a scarf can hide aging. Unless I wrap it around my eyes, maybe. She muttered with a smirk, finally deciding to head to her cabin to check her luggage. Walking down, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this was a mistake. What if cruises weren't her thing? Maybe she should have stayed home, binged another season of some dull show, and had a proper pity party. But no, the decision was made. "All right, Margot," she said firmly to herself as she slid the keycard into the cabin door. "You made the choice. Don't chicken out now." The cabin welcomed her with cool, hotel-like freshness. Her suitcases were already at the door, and Margaret, grunting and muttering, got to unpacking. "Why do I always bring so much? Let's be honest. Aside from a swimsuit and a light sweater, I probably won't need anything. Although, maybe I will need that fancy dress for the captain's dinner," she mumbled, putting things in the closet. "Let's just hope the captain isn't younger than my grandkids. Otherwise, I'll feel like some ancient dinosaur at a species exhibit." Once she finished unpacking, she glanced at her reflection and gave a small grimace. "Well, Margot, the mirror didn't crack. That's a win." Grabbing her sunglasses, she headed out to explore the ship. Decks, restaurants, bars. Everything felt fresh and unfamiliar, and it suddenly became easier to breathe. As if this place, this ship, was slowly lifting off the invisible weight she'd been dragging for months. She caught a glimpse of herself in one of the mirrored panels and smiled slightly. No one here knew her past. No one knew about the illness. Here she was just Margaret James, a regular passenger finally ready to unwind. As she passed the bar, she saw a cheerful man in a bright Hawaiian shirt telling a loud joke. The crowd around him burst out laughing, and he gave a theatrical bow before continuing. And then the doctor says, "Mr. Miller, you have to stop drinking, smoking, and eating sweets, or you'll only live to 100 instead of 120. Margaret smiled despite herself. Maybe this cruise really was a decent idea after all. "Well, old girl, maybe you should aim for 120 too," she whispered jokingly, heading toward the open deck railing. "As long as the sea doesn't make you sick. although after Dr. Simmons' prescriptions, nothing scares me anymore. She stepped onto the wide deck, took in the salty breeze, and felt something unexpected. Lightness. No one pitied her here, no one asked questions, no one looked at her with concern. She was free, and that was both terrifying and unexpectedly beautiful. The next morning, Margaret woke to the gentle rocking of the ship. She lay there for a moment with her eyes closed, just feeling it. Seems like the ocean's being kind today. Thank you, ocean, for not shaking me awake. She smiled to herself and slowly got out of bed. She got dressed, tied on her favorite blue scarf, and headed to breakfast. The ship's restaurant greeted her with a soft hum of voices and the tempting aroma of coffee and warm pastries. Sitting by the window, she gazed at the horizon and suddenly remembered her last conversation with her son before the trip. "Mom, why are you doing this?" Michael had asked, visibly worried. 10 days on the water? What if something happens? Just stay home and rest." Margaret smirked and blew a mental kiss to her son. "Oh, Mike, I've been resting at home for the last 10 years. If I stay another year, I'll turn into a couch cushion, a really grumpy one." A waiter appeared, young, smiling, with a name tag that read, Anthony. He looked at her and asked politely, "Coffee, no sugar, ma'am?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You remembered?" "Of course," Anthony smiled. "I'm a fast learner." She chuckled, barely hiding her grin. "Well, then it's nice to know at least one man in the world remembers my preferences." The waiter laughed and nodded as he walked away. Margaret watched him go, feeling an odd lightness. Such a small thing, and yet her mood had lifted. No one at home remembered things like that. She was always the one taking care of everyone, always keeping track, and had completely forgotten what it felt like to be noticed. "Turns out you do like a little attention, Margot," she whispered dryly, taking a sip of bold, bitter coffee. The illness had come back months ago. Not deadly, no. Just fatigue, pain, pills, and the constant need to pretend everything was fine. That was the most draining part. Always playing, "I'm okay," when all she wanted was to crawl under a blanket and cry it out. Back in Chicago, her days had blurred together. Morning, pills, afternoon, fatigue, evening, pills again, and some bland TV show. It felt like she wasn't living her life, but watching some endless dull soap opera about aging, written by someone who clearly hadn't bothered with a decent plot. But here, on this ship, everything felt different. People buzzed around her, waiters moved like elegant birds, and the endless ocean sparkled outside the windows. And somehow, somewhere deep inside her, hope started stirring again. After breakfast, she decided to go out onto the open deck. A wide staircase led up into the sun, warming her face. Once on top, she took in a long breath of salty air. "What a joy it is, just to breathe," she thought. "How long will this last, Margot?" Her thoughts were interrupted by a burst of laughter. She turned and saw a group of fellow seniors by the pool, talking, laughing, giving friendly shoulder pats. One woman noticed her and waved. Margaret offered a shy smile but didn't walk over. "Oh, great, the Happy Senior Club," she muttered, feeling that odd sting of loneliness rise up. "Too tired to join the crowd, too young to knit socks in a rocking chair. You're stuck in the middle, Margot, like a bad Monday between Sunday and Friday." She stepped aside, leaned against the railing, and stared out at the slow rhythm of the ocean. The sadness shifted into calm, then into awkwardness again. "What are you doing here, old lady?" she jabbed. "Trying to keep living? That's what," answered another voice inside her, steady and clear. Another round of laughter echoed behind her. She glanced again at the cheerful group. A small thought stirred in her chest. What if... Maybe there are people here I might actually want to talk to, even just once. Even if it's just about the weather or whether coffee should ever have sugar in it. She gave herself a little shake, adjusted her scarf, which had slipped again, and smiled to herself. "All right, Margot, enough brooding," she muttered. "You're here now, on this ship where no one knows how many pills you took this morning or how long it's been since you danced. So use it. Use this time to forget everything, at least for these 10 days. She looked out at the ocean again and felt the anxiety slowly ease. Here and now she was just Margaret. No diagnoses, no sadness. Just Margaret. That evening, Margaret decided to stop by one of the ship's cozy bars. The setting reminded her of old movies, dim lighting, soft music, and a gentle hum of conversation. She settled onto a tall stool at the counter, gazing thoughtfully at the colorful bottles lining the shelves. I wonder how many of these drinks I've never even tried. Then again, with all my meds, even water could get me tipsy, she thought with a smile. "Can I get you something, ma'am?" asked the bartender, a neatly dressed guy in his 20s with a perfectly pressed shirt. "Something not too strong, but not too innocent either," Margaret joked. "Something like a shot of youth." The bartender grinned and nodded, taking on the challenge. Just then a man sat down on the stool beside her. He looked a little older than her, wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt and a warm, friendly smile. "I'll have whatever she's having," he said, winking at Margaret. "Seems like the lady knows how to pick a good drink." Margaret blushed a little but smiled. "Careful who you trust, sir. Last time a man trusted me to choose his drink, he ended up my husband for the next 30 years. The stranger laughed, genuinely and warmly, and Margaret instantly felt a bit more at ease. He extended his hand. "Sam Miller, 68, on the run from doctors and boredom." "Margaret James, 63, fugitive from the same," she replied, shaking his hand. Sam gave her a knowing nod and smiled again. "So we both escaped the doctors, huh? Wonder if there's a reward out for us yet." Margaret chuckled softly, feeling oddly comfortable with this stranger. "Afraid the bounty wouldn't be very high. 2 retirees with a list of prescriptions aren't exactly prime targets for bounty hunters." "You're an optimist, Margaret. I like that in a person," Sam said, taking a sip of the drink the bartender had just set in front of them. They slipped into conversation easily and naturally. Before she knew it, Margaret was telling him about her fears, her son, Michael, life in Chicago, and yes, the illness too. Sam listened closely, tossing in funny comments that made even the heavier parts easier to share. "You know, Sam, do you know the last time I talked this much?" she asked suddenly, taking another sip of her refreshing drink. "Let me guess. At the doctor's office trying to convince him you're fine," Sam said with a wink. Margaret burst out laughing. "Exactly. And the doctor just stared at me like I was an old car about to fall apart right there in his office." Sam smiled with understanding. "That's why I ran off to here. I'd rather fall apart on a beach in the Dominican than in a hospital bed. By the way, there's an excursion tomorrow. Want to come with me?" Margaret hesitated for a moment. It had been a while since she'd joined any group outings. She usually preferred her solitude. But for some reason, the idea of spending the day with this funny, kind man felt nice. "Well, since we're both on the run, why not?" She smiled, her heart beating just a bit faster. "Perfect," Sam nodded, clearly pleased. "I promise, no complaining, no health talk. Just sunshine, sand, and bad jokes." Margaret felt her mood lift like a breeze catching her sails. Their conversation drifted into light banter and stories of past travels. By the time she headed back to her cabin, she felt a strange, unfamiliar excitement. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she realized, for the first time in a long while, she was actually looking forward to tomorrow. She smiled to herself, feeling almost like a girl again, about to step into something new and wonderful. "Well, Margot," she whispered, Looks like something interesting is waiting for you tomorrow, and you almost forgot what it's like to look forward to something." She turned off the light and fell asleep, free, for once, from the usual cloud of worries. In the middle of the night, Margaret woke to a soft voice calling her. When she opened her eyes, she realized it wasn't a voice at all. It was the ocean. A gentle whisper of waves, drawing her out to the balcony. She got up, draped her favorite scarf over her shoulders, and stepped barefoot onto the cool floor outside. The ocean beneath the moon looked endless and mysterious, like it held 1,000 untold stories. Leaning on the railing, Margaret inhaled the damp, salty air. "It's so beautiful," she thought with a quiet sigh. "So why does it make me feel sad?" She closed her eyes, and there he was. John, her husband. He'd always dreamed of traveling: Paris, Rome, Sydney. He had a whole list of cities they'd planned to visit when they retired. "The whole world's waiting for us, Margot," he'd say, sitting in his chair with a map in hand. But for some reason, we keep waiting for something else. But their someday never came. First work, then sickness, and then suddenly, he was gone, leaving her alone with a list of dreams they never fulfilled. Now she stood here, on a cruise she'd promised herself in John's memory. "Oh, Johnny," she whispered softly, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. "If you're up there watching me, I bet you're thinking, 'Margot, there you go again, being dramatic.'" She smiled through the tears. "But you know what? This time I'm not being dramatic. I'm really scared, growing old. It's nothing like we thought it'd be." She hugged herself tightly, feeling the chill of the night. The fear of being alone, of being sick. It crept closer, no longer hiding behind her jokes and sarcasm. It felt like all her worries and doubts had risen up from the ocean to surround her like jellyfish, impossible to outrun. Margaret exhaled shakily, staring out at the dark horizon. "Why now?" she wondered. "Why does this quiet, insistent voice always come just when I finally start to live again?" She closed her eyes and remembered those final months with John. Doctors, hospitals, medications, and their endless promises to each other that they still had time. "But we didn't make it, John," she whispered, as a hot tear slid down her cheek. "That's what hurts the most." She looked up at the stars. Suddenly it felt like John was up there, watching her, smiling gently, shaking his head in that same familiar way that always brought her peace. "All right, love," she whispered into the night. "I get it. I'll do this for both of us. Paris and Rome might be a stretch, but the Dominican, Aruba, and Curaçao? That's still within reach for an old lady like me." The tears dried slowly, leaving behind a trace of coolness on her face. She breathed in deeply, filling her lungs with salty air like it carried strength from the sea. The night was quiet, and the ocean calm, almost as if it approved of her decision. "You always said I was stubborn," she said into the dark with a half-smile. "Well, look, I'm stubbornly trying to keep living, even now." She turned and quietly stepped back into her cabin, closing the balcony door behind her. Her fears hadn't vanished, but something new had joined them. A quiet, unfamiliar sense of determination. In the morning, Margaret woke with a completely different feeling. Instead of the usual heaviness, there was a gentle, buzzing anticipation in her chest. She smiled at her reflection and said out loud, "All right, Margot, time to get up. The Dominican Republic and your new friend Sam are waiting. And enough with the dramatic midnight monologues. You're here to live, remember?" She got up with purpose, ignoring the small aches in her body, and walked toward the new day. Finally feeling that quiet, steady strength of someone who's ready to move forward. The excursion in the Dominican Republic started off beautifully. Bright sun, a gentle breeze, and picture-perfect scenery. But as soon as the group reached the main square of a small town, the skies suddenly darkened, and as if someone up above decided to mess with them, the skies opened up. Tourists squealed and laughed as they dashed under the awning of a nearby cafe. "Who said tropical rain is warm?" Margaret muttered grumpily, feeling the water soak her clothes at lightning speed. "Feels more like refreshing with a vengeance." Sam, standing beside her, burst out laughing. "Come on, Margot. Be grateful it's just rain. Could have been hail, and then we'd see if our heads are as hard as we think." Margaret snorted with laughter, feeling his good mood spread to her like sunshine. He reached out his hand, and without thinking, she took it, feeling the warmth of his fingers. "Well, we're officially soaked and miserable," Sam said, looking at her with a grin. "Perfect time for some local coffee and to laugh at how pathetic we look." The cafe buzzed with soaked tourists, cracking jokes and snapping photos. Margaret and Sam found a small table in the corner. She watched him wring out the edge of his shirt dramatically, saying, "If I catch a cold, at least I'll have earned it. In the Dominican under tropical rain." Margaret laughed, freely, genuinely, for the first time in what felt like ages. Something inside her cracked open, warm, gentle, like a flower blooming in the sun. "Sam, are you sure you're 68? She asked playfully. "Because judging by your behavior, you're no more than 17. Sam made a serious face and leaned in conspiratorially. "I am a teenager. I just age badly. Doctors say it's from laughing too much." Margaret laughed again, this time completely unrestrained. She realized she hadn't let herself just enjoy a moment like this in so long. No thoughts of pills, pain, or tomorrow. Just joy. Real, belly-aching joy. They chatted and joked for what felt like hours, and then, just as suddenly as it started, the rain stopped and the sun returned. Bright, cheerful, as if the storm had never happened. Back in her cabin that evening, Margaret stood in front of the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. Her eyes sparkled again. Her cheeks were sun-kissed, and her smile came effortlessly. She took a deep breath and said to her reflection, "Margot, look at you. Who would have thought all you needed was a good soaking in the rain? With a silver-haired teenager." She smiled at herself, feeling a new and unfamiliar desire to actually live. No more hiding in her cabin. No more dodging people or opportunities. Maybe, just maybe, this ship was the place where she'd finally learn that age and illness aren't reasons to stop finding joy. "All right, old girl," she said firmly to her reflection, adjusting her hair and scarf. "Starting tomorrow, you're in. No more excuses." She turned off the light, feeling lightness and a happy flutter in her chest about the day to come. For the first time in a very long time, she fell asleep smiling, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. That evening, Margaret swung open the closet with purpose and, after only a moment's hesitation, pulled out the dark blue dress that had been sitting there since her last wedding anniversary. She smoothed the fabric gently, feeling its softness under her fingers, and smiled at the memory. "Well, dress, your time has come. You've lived in that closet long enough," she said aloud, brushing her hand over it. "Let's go prove we've still got it." She did a light touch of makeup and carefully applied the lipstick she usually saved for special occasions. Looking at herself in the mirror, she thought, "If anyone at dinner thinks I've overdone it, I'll just say it's my camouflage from aging." The captain's dinner was elegant and grand. Soft lighting, live music, guests dressed to the nines. The waitstaff moved with the precision of a Broadway cast. Margaret felt a bit awkward until she spotted Sam, smiling as he walked toward her. "Margot, I barely recognized you," he said, eyeing her dress. "Who are you, and what have you done with the sarcastic lady in the wet t-shirt I met in the Dominican?" Margaret laughed and playfully tapped his arm. "She's still here, just hiding behind makeup and a dress. You're looking pretty good yourself, by the way." Even that Hawaiian shirt looks almost formal." "I did my best," Sam said with mock modesty, offering his hand. "May I have this dance, madam?" She hesitated for a split second, then thought, "Why not?" and smiled. The dance was easier than she expected, and the lights spinning to the sound of jazz filled her with joy and a sweet touch of nostalgia. "You're a great dancer, Sam," she said, trying to catch her breath. "Oh, Margot, it's just the art of not stepping on your partner's feet," he replied with a grin. "And if you do step on them, do it with charm." She laughed again, amazed at how natural it now felt to be among people. Waiter Anthony passed by and winked. "Ma'am, your no-sugar coffee is already on tomorrow's list." "Thank you, Anthony," she smiled warmly. "But tomorrow I might surprise you and add sugar. Aging should come with plot twists." At the next table sat Jim and Linda from Texas, friendly, loud, and full of life. Margaret quickly joined in their conversation, laughing over the little travel mishaps and endless complaints about aging that sounded more like jokes. "Have you noticed that after 60, everything you do is either heroic or ridiculous?" Linda laughed. "Exactly why I try to alternate the two," Margaret replied, "just to keep people guessing." When the waiter poured champagne, she raised her glass, glanced around at her new friends, and felt something deep, sincere, and joyful inside her. "I'm back among people," she thought, warmth blooming in her chest, and a sense of gratitude flooding her for this night. It felt like illness, fear, and loneliness had been tossed overboard, lost somewhere in the deep waters. After dinner, she said goodnight to her new friends and Sam, and walked slowly down the corridor to her cabin. The smile hadn't left her face, but as she got closer, Margaret noticed something pinned to her door, a small slip of paper neatly placed at eye level. She stopped, surprised, her heart skipping just a little. "What's this?" she wondered. Carefully, curiously, she stepped closer to read the message. Margaret gently took the note off her door and squinted slightly as she read the neat handwriting. "Thank you for your laughter yesterday. You inspired me. Eleanor, cabin 612. She couldn't help but smile and glanced around, half expecting to spot the note's author. The hallway was empty, but the warmth of those words had already done their magic. A pleasant wave rose in her chest, spreading through her whole body. Margaret didn't even realize her smile was getting wider and softer. "Well, look at that, Margot," she thought with amused irony. "You always figured inspiration was for celebrities and athletes. And here you are, just a rain-soaked retiree somehow giving someone hope. What's next? Signing autographs?" Back in her cabin, she placed the note carefully on the nightstand and gazed at it for a moment, as if afraid the feeling might slip away. It was strange and wonderful to realize that her simple, genuine laughter had made someone's day. "I guess I forgot that laughter's the one medicine you can't buy in a pharmacy or get prescribed," she whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Well, Margot, here's proof that no illness can take away your right to feel joy. Doesn't matter how old you are or how many pills you take at breakfast." Those thoughts settled over her like ocean waves gently rocking the ship. She lay down and closed her eyes, the smile still lingering on her face. Images from the past few days floated in her mind. Sam and his boyish energy, Jim and Linda with their non-stop jokes, young Anthony the waiter who always remembered her coffee, no sugar. People really are the best medicine, she thought, as she drifted off to sleep. The final day of the cruise came sooner than expected. Her suitcase was packed, her things neatly folded, and now the cabin looked bland again, stripped of the warmth she'd added during her stay. Margaret stood by the window, watching the shoreline slowly rise on the horizon. As the morning sun shimmered on the water, a gentle sadness settled in. It was time to say goodbye to the ship, But something inside her told her that everything she'd felt here, she was taking with her. Like tossing a message in a bottle to my future self, she smiled at the thought, a reminder of how it felt to be alive again. A new day was ahead, and now Margaret knew one thing for sure. Her life belonged to her, and only she could decide how to live it. The final dinner on the ship felt like a warm family gathering, where everyone was relaxed and completely at ease. Around a large round table sat people who, just a week ago, were strangers, and now felt almost like kin. Margaret looked around at the faces of her new friends, and couldn't help but smile. Sam was in the middle of another joke, and Jim and Linda were laughing so hard even the waitstaff had to pause and grin. "Hey, remember when we got caught in that downpour in the Dominican?" Sam asked, shooting a playful look at Margaret. "Someone swore vengeance on the weatherman." "If I ever find them, they'll remember the day they met a senior with an umbrella," she replied, shaking her finger in mock warning. Everyone burst into laughter. Sam pulled out his camera and said with theatrical seriousness, "All right, folks, best smiles, please. This is a historic moment." He aimed it at Margaret and said gently, "Smile, Margot. Let's save this one for the next batch of memories." Something stirred quietly inside her. His words weren't just a joke. They held the kind of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Margaret smiled wide, suddenly feeling young and alive again, like she was 25 and the whole world was still ahead of her. "Perfect," Sam said, snapping the photo. "Now we have proof that we were happy, in case our memories start failing us." "Speak for yourself, Sam," Jim winked. "I plan to remember every moment, especially the ones where you promised to pick up the tab next cruise." The table roared with laughter again, and Margaret realized that, for the first time, she wasn't thinking about illness or age. She wasn't an old, tired woman. She was someone still full of life, with so much left to live. "You know what, friends?" she said, raising her glass of champagne. "This cruise has been the best medicine. Thank you all for the laughter. I'll never forget it." Everyone raised their glasses in agreement. When dinner ended, no one really wanted to leave, dragging their feet as they said their goodnights. Even Sam, usually all cheer and mischief, looked a little wistful. "Margot," he said quietly, "thanks for this week. Would have been a lot duller without you." "Right back at you, Sam," she smiled. "I'm glad I met you, and all of you. Life's a strange thing, huh?" "It is," he nodded. "Especially when you think you've seen it all, and then suddenly the best part shows up out of nowhere." She returned to her cabin with a lightness in her step and a quiet joy inside her. She fell asleep quickly, her mind and body finally in sync. At sunrise, Margaret woke to see soft gold light brushing the horizon. The ship was nearing the shore. She stood by the window, feeling a calm, solid confidence in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. And now she knew, without a doubt, the best was still to come. Margaret stood on the deck, gently leaning on the railing, eyes closed, breathing in the cool sea air. She could taste it, salty and alive, as if the ocean was sharing its endless energy with her. The ship was almost at the shore now, and a quiet sadness was slowly weaving its way into her heart. Saying goodbye to the ship felt like parting with a dear friend who showed up just when she needed him most. "Thank you, ocean," she whispered in her mind, feeling the fresh breeze brush against her hair. "You brought back what I thought I'd lost, the confidence that I'm still alive." She slowly opened her eyes and looked at the horizon, where the sun had already begun its steady climb. Images from the past days floated through her memory. The rain in the Dominican, Sam's jokes, Linda and Jim's infectious laughter, Eleanor's quiet little note, and even that sweet waiter, Anthony. Each of them had left a mark on her heart. Like signatures on a postcard she'd never forget. If you ever think life is over, take a step toward the ocean. she thought quietly, realizing the phrase had become her new mantra. Her new truth. Now Margaret knew for sure. Life always goes on. You just have to give it the chance. With a soft sigh and a smile, she grabbed her suitcase and slowly moved toward the gangway, where other passengers were already disembarking. Her eyes caught a flash of a familiar bright Hawaiian shirt. "Hey, Margot!" Sam was standing near the exit, grinning and waving a small business card. "Don't forget me, all right? And if you ever feel like running away from doctors again, call me. I'm always down for another escape." Margaret laughed and nodded playfully, feeling like a teenager getting a note from a classmate. "I'll definitely call you, Sam. And don't you dare lose that Hawaiian shirt. I wouldn't recognize you without it." He winked and dramatically adjusted his collar. "This shirt is worth fighting for, you know." As she stepped off the gangway and onto solid ground, Margaret smiled at the sun and at the people passing by, feeling a new fire in her chest, one that wouldn't go out so easily this time. She wasn't old or sick or tired. She was a woman alive with plans, with Sam's card in her pocket. She turned for one last look at the ocean, waved at the ship and whispered to herself, "All right, Margot, let's go. The real fun is just beginning." If you ever feel lost, try changing the scenery. Doesn't matter what's behind you, illness, fatigue, loneliness. You're still alive, as long as you want to see the sun and meet new people. Joy is medicine, too, the kind you can give yourself.